36 chaotic hours in Switzerland. Trump nearly blew up his own negotiations. Iran's delegation walked out and had to be pulled back. Lebanon kept fighting, despite a ceasefire being in place, and yet, U.S. and Iranian negotiators emerged on Monday saying they had a deal, a roadmap. A final agreement within 60 days. Vice President Vance called it a very good foundation. Iran's foreign minister called it major progress. Then the very next day, the U.S. and Iran publicly contradicted each other on whether Iran had actually agreed to let nuclear inspectors into the country. In this video, we break down exactly what came out of Switzerland, what's already being disputed, and what the real numbers behind the Hormuz reopening actually tell us. Let's start with the concrete outcomes, because there were real ones, even amid all the chaos. The main result of the Switzerland talks was this. A high-level committee with political oversight agreed on a roadmap toward a final deal within 60 days. Under that committee, negotiating groups were formed, covering sanctions relief, nuclear issues, reconstruction, and monitoring. A separate contact mechanism was created specifically for Hormuz shipping and the fighting in Lebanon. Now, Vance mentioned something very specific. Both sides agreed to demine the Strait of Hormuz. That detail matters, because Trump himself had previously acknowledged Iran laid mines in the strait during the war. Clearing those mines is now an agreed task between the two sides. That's not diplomatic language. That's a physical reality on the ocean floor. Vance put it this way, quote, "The final deal is the house. We set the foundation. We haven't built the house, but we've laid a successful foundation." That's actually an honest description. The foundation is real. The house does not yet exist. Iran's foreign minister Araghchi listed what he called concrete wins, already being implemented. Oil and petrochemical exports waived, blockade lifted, some frozen assets released. A reconstruction plan launched for Iran. Then he called the Lebanon deconfliction cell the first real test of the entire process. Think about what that framing means. The test isn't the nuclear talks. It isn't the sanctions negotiations. It's whether Lebanon stays quiet enough for everything else to move forward. Here's where things get genuinely complicated. Within 24 hours of Switzerland ending, the US and Iran were publicly contradicting each other on the single most important specific claim to come out of the talks. Vance told reporters, quote, "The Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people, and the first step in permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran." Trump reinforced this on social media, writing, "Everybody is fully aware that Iran will agree to have major weapons inspections to ensure nuclear honesty long into the future." Then Iran responded. Tehran's position, through state media, was essentially this. No new commitments were made. Whatever was said about inspectors referred to the existing IAEA framework, already in the 14-point memorandum. Not new, expanded access. Not access to bomb sites specifically. This is not a minor technical disagreement. Here's why it matters so much. Much of Iran's highly enriched uranium is believed to be buried under rubble, at sites that were specifically targeted in the U.S.-Israeli strikes. Allowing inspectors under a general framework is a completely different question from, at sea, allowing inspectors into those bomb sites. Vance appeared to be claiming the former. Iran appeared to be denying it. Iran's President Pezeshkian put it carefully, quote, "The effectiveness of the talks depends on full commitment to the agreed obligations and their precise implementation." Read that closely. That is not a confirmation of expanded nuclear access. That is a warning that Iran is watching whether the U.S. delivers on what it agreed to. If the two sides can't agree on what was decided in Switzerland, not in the abstract, but on a specific named commitment that Vance made the centerpiece of his press conference, that's a problem. The roadmap may have two very different routes, depending on which side is reading it. Here's a data point that deserves far more attention than it's getting. Before the war, roughly 100 ships per day crossed the Strait of Hormuz. On Monday, 39 ships made the crossing. That's 39% of normal traffic. The strait is technically open, but it's operating at less than half its pre-war capacity, and that's after what's being called a reopening. For context, at the peak of the war's disruption, crossings had dropped by over 90%. So yes, 39% is real progress, but calling it a reopening without those numbers, is doing a lot of work. And here's the structural problem. Shipping companies don't make decisions based on one day's announcement. They make decisions based on weeks and months of risk assessment. Insurers have to recalculate premiums. Crews have to agree to transit routes. Port authorities have to assess security arrangements. All of that takes time, measured in weeks and months, not press conferences. The demining commitment actually makes this worse, not better, in the short term. Because if both sides agree that mines need to be cleared from the strait, that's an acknowledgement that mines are still there. And shipping companies know it. Clearing mines from a major waterway is not a quick process. Until it's done, the incentive to route through Hormuz remains lower than before the war. Regardless of what the political agreements say, Iran's foreign minister called the Lebanon deconfliction cell the first real test of this process. So, how is that test going? The most positive sign came on Sunday. For the first time since the Israel-Hezbollah war started on March 2nd, the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon recorded no attacks from either side. That's a real, measurable 24-hour calm, the first in nearly 4 months, and the longest pause in fighting in the entire conflict. But look closer. The Israeli military said troops fired at 4 Hezbollah members who had entered a security zone and failed to stop despite warning shots. Lebanon's state news agency reported 2 men were killed next to a bulldozer clearing a road. So even in the longest ceasefire pause, there were still lethal incidents, just at a lower scale than before. Now here's a critical structural problem pointed out by former senior U.S. diplomat Joey Hood. Neither the Lebanese government nor the Israeli government were directly involved in the negotiations that produced this Lebanon mechanism. The deconfliction cell was designed by the U.S., Iran, Qatar, and Pakistan, not by Israel or Lebanon, who are the ones actually fighting. Hood put it plainly, quote, "It's giving Iran that veto power over Lebanon." And the memorandum, he said, seems to be saying, we accept Iran's regional leadership role, including over its proxies. Netanyahu reaffirmed on Monday that Israeli forces will remain in the security zone, quote, as long as necessary. Right to strike Hezbollah. Indefinite stay. Hardline position, unchanged. That position is incompatible with what Iran says is a precondition for this deal to hold. That contradiction is sitting directly underneath a ceasefire that is, for the first time, holding for more than a day. The Center for Strategic and International Studies published its analysis this week. Their assessment, plainly stated, the full text of the framework agreement with Iran is now public. And it is lopsided. Iran gets most of what it wants, and it gets it up front. Before negotiations on a final deal even start, the United States gets very little, Israel gets even less. That's coming from a serious, nonpartisan defense think tank, and it echoes what Iran's own foreign minister has been saying. Oil exports waived, blockade lifted, frozen assets released, reconstruction plan launched. All of that Iran gets now, before the 60-day talks even conclude. The U.S., under the same framework, gets a commitment not to pursue nuclear weapons, and an agreement to invite inspectors, the latter of which Iran is now disputing. CSIS also put the total cost of the Iran war at between $34 and $42 billion. And noted, neither the 2026 nor the 2027 defense budgets include war costs. Congress faces a major fight over paying for this war. That $80 billion emergency Pentagon request is one consequence of that gap. This detail is unusual, but it illustrates something real about the human side of this story. Among the many things thrown into disarray by the February strikes was Iran's soccer infrastructure. Despite that, despite visa issues, travel restrictions, and an active war, Iran entered the 2026 World Cup. And as of this week, they're still alive in group play, needing a result against Belgium to potentially reach the knockout round for the first time in 6 World Cup appearances dating back to 1978. Think about that image. The Iranian national team playing in the World Cup, while Iran's negotiating delegation is in Switzerland and Islamabad, actively trying to end a war. That tells you something about the surreal nature of where this country is right now. 3 things to track carefully from here. First, the IAEA inspector dispute. This is the clearest, most concrete disagreement currently in public between the U.S. and Iran. Whether it gets resolved quietly or becomes a public standoff, will tell you exactly how the 60-day window is going to go. Second, Lebanon's daily ceasefire data. Vance said, quote, "The past 24 hours have probably been the most peaceful we've seen. If that holds for a week, that's meaningful. If it breaks down again, that triggers the same Iran threat to reclose Hormuz that's already been used twice." Third, Hormuz ship traffic numbers. Daily. The gap between 39 ships and the pre-war 100 deal is the economic reality of this deal right now. That gap is what's keeping fuel prices elevated in parts of Asia and Europe, regardless of what the political announcements say. And watch the technical talks at Birkenstock this week. The working groups on nuclear issues, sanctions, and dispute resolution, those are the ones doing the real work. Whether they produce concrete agreements in the coming days will be the first real signal of whether 60 days is actually enough. Here's the honest summary. There's a real roadmap. Real institutional structures. A ceasefire in Lebanon that is, for the first time, actually holding for more than a day. That is genuine progress. But the map's destination is disputed before anyone's taken the first step. The US and Iran are already publicly contradicting each other on the nuclear inspector commitment that Vance made the centerpiece of the entire Switzerland trip. Hormuz is at 39% of normal traffic. Lebanon's ceasefire is holding down on the thinnest possible terms. The house hasn't been built yet, and the architect and the contractor don't agree on what it's supposed to look like. Subscribe if you want this tracked as it develops. Thanks for watching.